What's going on, everyone? My name's Tom from Dreadlabs, and today we're going to talk about illustrations.
Dreadlabs.
Alright, so as some of you know, I do some illustration work from time to time. It's definitely not the thing I'm best at, I would say. But it's, you know, I doodle from time to time, and sometimes I just try to digitalize them, I guess. And I thought it would be a cool video to share some tips that I have for you guys if you are kind of new to doodling and you want to digitalize your artworks and to make flat illustrations, have a little bit more character, basically. So we're here in Photoshop. This is an illustration that I made on my iPad with Procreate, and I just put it into Photoshop. I think this was from Inktober a few years ago, and I think the word was enchanted or something. So yeah, I had a pretty fun time making this one. I basically wanted to use this illustration to give you guys some examples on how to give your illustration a little bit more character, because as you can see at this moment it looks kind of flat, and that's just because we use straight lines. And that brings me to the first point where you can actually give your line work a little bit more character, and that is through brushes. So if you are an experienced illustrator, you might already know about this, but if you're completely new to this, I figured it would be a nice touch to explain this. So normally when you open your brush tool, you would just have a brush like this, and just make a new layer, and the brush would look like this, right? There's actually ways that you can manipulate your brushes, and let me just show you how to do that. So you want to go to Window, Brush Settings. So here on the top right, that's basically the main menu on how you can change your brush. Again, this is pretty basic stuff, you might already know about this, but I figured I'd share it anyway. So if you are using a graphic tablet like I do, there's actually a way that you can improve the illustration work in one step. So if we go down to Shape Dynamics, and under the size jitter, you have this control button, and if you press on pen pressure, the size of your brush will basically be affected by the pen pressure that you put on your tablet. So let me just show you what I mean by that. If I hold my pen against the tablet very softly, you'll get a thin line, and the harder you push, the thinner your line will become. So this can be really useful. So if we zoom in, you can kind of see it here already. If we do like shading lines or something like that. So if we do shading lines, for example, it's very easy to make these and make them gradually bigger the more you go towards the end point. Another cool thing I like to do is using other types of media brushes, and the way you can find them is actually in the top menu. You can find them in two ways basically. Here under brush tip shape, you can find them all over here, but here you have a little bit more of an extensive menu. So these should come in Photoshop, but if you go to this brush menu here at the top and you click this downward arrow, you get like dry media brushes, wet media brushes. And one that I really seem to like is Kyle's Inkbox Classic Cartoonist. This is just a brush, but yeah, if we make some lines. But as you can see, if we zoom in, the lines are a little bit more gritty. And as you can see, the line keeps evolving once we draw more. So to give you guys an idea on what this would look like in a illustration, I'm just gonna go and make my illustration invisible. And I'm gonna cue a time lapse where I will just make this illustration, but then with a wet media brush. So yeah, see you after the time lapse. Alright, so this took about, let's see, 20 minutes or something. Oh, I see that I forget the ripples of the water here. But yeah, that doesn't really matter, just to give you guys some examples. And as you can see, this looks a little bit gritty now. And I gotta be honest here, I really like this. And this just gives you a little bit more character, makes it seem like it's printed out, or has it been like, maybe it's drawn with like a marker or whatever. But yeah, this just gives a little bit more character than the first one. And let me just bring that up real quick. If we compare these together, I just like this one way better. So yeah, now one thing that I wanted to talk about is if you don't have a graphic tablet, you might be like, okay, but I cannot do anything about this. But as you can see, I'm already duplicating the other one. And basically I'm gonna give you guys some tricks to do this manually. This will obviously like give you guys a little bit less authentic results because you're not doing everything by hand. So you know, the line work will be the exact same. The method I'm going to teach you is displacement maps. And if you don't know about displacement maps, I have a video on my channel, it will be up here. Anyways, you want to prepare some displacement map or whatever. So what I'm going to do is I am going to load in one of the paper textures that's available on dreadlabs.net. Link will be in the description. But basically you can just grab any paper texture that you like, or any other texture for that matter. For this, I just have this gray paper texture, and I'm going to just make sure that it will fit the whole screen. I'm going to right click the layer, duplicate it to a new document, displacement map. So I want to do a couple of adjustments here. The first one being going to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And we're going to blur this about 2 pixels. And we'll scale this up a little bit so that it will cover everything. And the next thing is we want to play a little bit with the contrast here. So I'm going to go to adjustments here. If you cannot find this window here, you go to window adjustments. And I'm going to bring in a curves layer. And basically playing around with this a little bit so that there will be like a little bit of difference in the pixels, but I don't want to have like a super big difference like this. Just a subtle one. So something like this should be fine, and then we're going to save this up as a PSD file. Alright, so now with that being done, you can just delete the old paper texture in this part here. And if you remember, we right click this and made this into a smart object. And it's very important because now we can go to filter, distort, displace. And all of these settings, we're going to leave them at 10, 10, stretch to fit, repeat edge pixels, and embed file data in smart object. Click OK. And we're going to click the displacement map that we just saved. And as you can see, we kind of get a similar result as what we did with the gritty brush. The edges are a little bit softer in this one, and but yeah, looking at this, it works pretty well. I still prefer the other one because the edges are just a little bit harder, but this is a very easy and quick way to, you know, fix this. So yeah, if you don't have a drawing tablet or you're on a timer or whatever, I would say try around with displacement maps, and you can use any texture for this. I would just say make it a grungy texture. All right, so for the next step, we're gonna color this in real quick. So cue the time lapse, and yeah, let's color it in. Alright guys, so I fixed the colors real quick. The next thing you can do to give your illustration a little bit more character is using textures. And I'm going to use a texture that we used before from the displacement map. Again, link in the description. And what we can do is we can just remove the curves on this. And we can also remove the Gaussian blur. And we'll just duplicate this into our file. Right, we'll just bring this to the top here. So I'm going to use some blending modes. If you want to learn all about texturing and blending modes, I have a video for that as well. We'll pop over right now, or link in the description. Anyways, if we put the blend mode to screen here, you can see that the texture is already coming through a little bit. And what I really like about this texture is how well it goes with the darker lines of an illustration. And we can emphasize on that by pressing Ctrl or Command M on our keyboard, which will bring up the curves menu, but then it will just be applied to this smart object here. And the more we drag this in, the darker the illustration will become. But if we drag the light in as well, there will be a little bit more contrast to this. So something like that should be fine. Really like this, but there's one thing I want to kind of see if I can change it. And I'm going to do that by duplicating the layer here from the line work. So we'll call this original one line work. And we'll call this line work FX. And I'm going to right click and see if we can do some like cool experiments with this. The first thing I want to do is go to filter, blur, box blur. Now if we zoom in, you have that subtle like ink bleed going through here, and see if we make the old line work invisible. You can kind of see that it now starts blending in or bleeding in a little bit more. And there's actually a way we can make this even like better. And if we go to line work FX and double click, this will bring us into a smart object layer where it's just the line work. And what I want to do is make a new layer, fill it up with just white, and put it to the back. So now we just have a black and white illustration. And now, as you can see, well, we have the white background here. But if we press Command L or Control L, or if you're in Windows on a keyboard, you can increase the contrast of this. Basically, essentially making the lines a little bit harder, but still keeping that ink bleed. Also, if you want to learn more about this, I also have a video on how to play around with masks and bleeds. Basically showing you why this works to expand or contract the line work. But yeah, link for that will also be in the description. Anyways, as you can see, we can shrink or expand the line work this way. And the further away these 2 points are, the longer the ink bleed will be. And the closer they are, the harder the edge will be, basically. And I think I'm fine with something like this. And now we can just put the blend mode to multiply. And there we have it. And now if we compare that to the original line work, it just looks a little bit more realistic in my opinion. Alright, so some final thoughts. If you want to explore more with brushes, there are actually a lot of people who make their own custom brushes for Photoshop and for Procreate. So I would highly suggest looking on websites like Creative Market or just Googling it. For Photoshop, you also have this website called Brush Easy, which has a lot of free brushes. You might find a couple of cool brushes there. Another great one on the web store of Dreadlabs, we have a spray paint package by the Law of Zor. So yeah, if you want to learn more about doing like graffiti, I'll show you real quick what that looks like. So yeah, if you are, for example, interested in seeing if you can draw graffiti over your illustrations or something like that, this is a brush pack that you can find on dreadlabs.net. So yeah, as you can see, a very realistic looking brush. That's just one of the many brushes that you can use for Photoshop and Procreate. So I would highly suggest seeing whatever matches your style and whatever complements your illustrations the most. Same goes for textures really, there are a lot of textures online. So I would highly suggest browsing some websites, see if you can find the perfect ones. There are a couple available for only a few bucks on my website, dreadlabs.net. Again, link will be in the description. Now before we end it off, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of my Patreons. So if you don't know, if you become a patron of mine, you'll get access to all of the project files from all of my tutorials, including this one, a 15% discount in the Dreadlabs web store, and an exclusive Discord role on the Dreadlabs Discord server. So if you want to become a patron, there will be a link in the description. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed this video. This was Tom from Dreadlabs tuning out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.